Hello.
Our story begins on Umbara. Jedi General Pong Krell is escaping from the troopers who had been serving with him since he arrived. They cracked the code. He wasn't fully supporting the Republic anymore. He was a Jedi through and through before the beginning of the Clone Wars, but now he could see that the war would come to an end. Pong had a vision. One of the Jedi being wiped out by the clones. The ones who rose from the ashes of the war were the Sith. He refused to be killed by beings manufactured inside of tubes. Krell had this vision at the beginning of the war, which is why the death counts were drastically higher than anyone else who led, but the vision only continued to get twisted as the war went on. The clones were going to be the architects of the Jedi's failure to find victory. Krell ran through the Umbaran forest, cutting down clones who came across him. He knew how talented these creatures were, and while he didn't want to admit it, it wasn't worth him wasting his own life and time to try and deal with them. The rising Empire would handle them in the future. He was sure of that. Pong leapt from tree to tree, cutting down a few clones quick enough to catch up to him. His one motive was getting off-world, and with 2 landing bays in the area, he could secure them for himself. He could either return to the forward command post the clones secured under his command, or he could sneak behind Kenobi's lines and steal a gunship or another vessel. He decided that he didn't want to accidentally engage with Obi-Wan Kenobi, so he turned back to the command post they secured and made a move for a vessel. There were a number of clones inside the facility waiting for him, and when they approached him, he sliced them up and killed them, all without remorse. Pong slipped into a Republic gunship and lifted off. Because there were no survivors inside the facility, they couldn't inform Rex or Fives that something had happened. Pong was able to safely escape to a Venator overhead. Rex and the clones on the ground never informed anyone else of the situation here, mostly because it was a volunteer-only mission. Once Krell turned on the volunteers, it became more apparent that something was awry, but again, everyone present inside the base was cut down when Krell escaped. Once he reached the Venator, he traded out vessels, getting out of the gunship and getting inside a Jedi starfighter and vanishing from Umbara. The battle was a slaughter, and it would eventually come to an end. The Jedi would also learn about the extra struggles due to Pong being present. Skywalker would be very disappointed and angry with the outcome, but he would be glad that he discouraged Ahsoka from going to that battlefront, though he did feel it was odd that Palpatine pulled him back to Coruscant at such an important battle. Krell knew that he wouldn't be useful for the Republic anymore. The tube creations would surely inform General Kenobi, and the Jedi Master would put a no-contact notice out for General Krell, or worse. Krell had respect for General Kenobi, but he had no intention of trying to save him. He was lost, just as every other Jedi was. Pong needed to save himself, and the best way to do that was through Dooku. The former Jedi could be used as a way out, and so Pong made his way to Sereno. He'd meet with Count Dooku and hopefully become his ally and/or apprentice. When he arrived, he was greeted by a massive Separatist fleet, and then he was given permission to land on the surface. Once Krell reached the castle, he was greeted by Dooku himself. Pong and Krell were relatively familiar with each other. Pong was slightly younger, but they had sparred on a couple occasions, and they'd also spoken about the Republic and its failure. Krell was still Jedi enough at the time to be blinded by his arrogance. Once Dooku left the Order, Krell considered everything, but never felt the call to leave. With the war raging on, it felt like he had no other choice, and all these points were made to Dooku. However, Dooku was kind of done with the whole apprenticeship thing. He had Ventress, who he was forced to get rid of. Once she was gone, Dooku went to find another assassin and returned with Savage Obraz. He was very talented, obviously a bit possessed with dark magic because he could lift 20 pillars with no training, but Dooku had high hopes for him, and then he just turned on him. One of many assassination attempts made by the Ninth Sister after that witch Asajj Ventress vanished from his apprenticeship. Speaking of, Dooku needed to send Grievous to Dathomir. Regardless of all of that, Dooku and Pong spoke for an elongated period of time. They had no real conclusions, but Dooku made a point to the fallen Jedi. He said that, while he wouldn't accept him as his own student and he wouldn't try and further his training, he would give him advice. Pong was eager to take it, and so Dooku suggested that instead of relying on him, he should go out into the galaxy and find every Sith temple he could, and then find and learn as much as possible. Dooku admitted and confirmed that the Jedi and Republic would crumble, so while Krell might not have a place on either side of the Clone Wars, he 100% would have a chance to find a place in the new order that would rise in the future. Dooku even, very kindly, gave Pong a time frame to work within. It was after all at this point, the middle of the Clone Wars. Krell had about a year and a half to get everything he wanted together before the war would come crashing down in the face of the Republic. Krell was greatly appreciative, and he asked Dooku if he may have his personal frequency. Dooku denied the request, informing his friend that his master wouldn't take too kindly to that. Krell was surprised, but then it became even more apparent that Dooku wasn't the one in control. He accepted everything that he was told and then left Sereno. Krell was also given a new ship too. one that was enough supply to last him that year and a half until the war was over. Dooku had the credits and he could just give stuff like that to anyone he wanted to, and so he didn't. He believed that when the Empire rose, he would take his seat next to the Emperor, and that Krell would make a fine ally in that future. But that day would never come for the Countess Sereno. Pong would take the advice of his older friend and spend the next year of his life familiarizing himself with the dark arts. He wouldn't be involved in the war, but he would kill multiple clones and a number of Jedi during this time. He wouldn't be found by the Republic for the rest of the war. Instead, his journey would take him to numerous homeworlds of the Sith. Krell would feel the desire to visit Dooku from time to time, to see if he could garner any more information, but about halfway through the period of which the war was supposed to be going through, Krell noticed that he had the information inside of his vessel. The data logs had information on everything. There were waypoints for locations across the galaxy, Sith worlds to hidden worlds. Dooku even plugged in information from his Sith Wayfinder into it. Krell could go to Exegol if he wanted, but he had no desire, being that it was so far away in the unknown regions. When the war eventually did come to an end, Krell was wielding a red lightsaber, and he was known as a hunter, though all he did was mind his own business. If he came across someone he thought to be troublesome, he would deal with them, but there was little of that. He was very focused on finding his information. Though the fallen Jedi very quickly understood why the Jedi rejected darkness, they feared having true power. Pong never felt so powerful in his life. He believed that if he had these powers during the war, he could have been the most powerful Jedi the Order had, let alone the fact that he could have slaughtered every single clone on Umbara with his eyes closed. His vessel was filled to the brim with Sith holocrons and artifacts. It was after the war ended that he realized Dooku was gone, and he knew that this was a chance to become the Emperor's servant. Sidious was the Emperor of the galaxy, and Pong believed that the ploy was brilliant. In a way for him to earn the Emperor's trust, he went to the Jedi Temple and requested an audience with the Emperor. Though the message fell on deaf ears, the Emperor wasn't present in his office. He was instructing Vader at the moment, so when Krell went to the temple, he interacted with Grand Inquisitor, defeating him but not killing him. Turns out Grand Inquisitor was waiting for Vader, and so Krell had a 1 versus 1 with Vader as well. Their blades clashed rhythmically, until Pong saw the Emperor and thrusted his blades forward. His speed was unstoppable. He shoved Vader backwards, and using the Force, the massive former Jedi threw Vader across the room. Sidious just watched the two enforcers get defeated by Pong Krell. But instead of fear, he was prideful. Pong knelt to the ground after defeating Vader and Grand Inquisitor. He told the Emperor that he survived for the sole purpose of serving him. Sidious loved this. It was clear that Krell wasn't a Jedi. He wanted to be a Sith, so why stop him? This immediately pissed off Vader. Grand Inquisitor didn't really mind. He knew his place. He did crave power, but he understood there was a ceiling for him, especially with Vader around. For Darth Vader, on the other hand, he was supposed to be the right-hand man. He just lost to Pong Krell, and Sidious prided him. But this was the way of the Sith. There was no permanence for the weak. It truthfully wasn't Vader's fault either. Krell had been practicing the dark arts for over a year, and had been fully trained much longer than that. Vader only had about a couple months inside the suit by this point. He wasn't even ready for this confrontation. Sidious loved this tension that it created between Krell and Vader. It was another way for the Sith Lord to ensure that all eyes weren't on him. With Vader and Krell focused on each other, then there'd be no need to worry about someone trying to fight him and take his throne, because they'd be so focused on trying to kill each other. What annoyed Vader even more was the fact that he couldn't do anything about it. He literally was trapped, unless Sidious believed that Krell wanted to kill him, obviously, but that wasn't true. Pong wasn't a pushover, but he knew his limits. He wanted to further his training so that he could become a powerful Sith. He learned everything he needed with the Jedi. Now he would become a force within the Empire. Krell understood that the goal was longevity. He didn't need accolades, all he wanted was to survive. However, due to the demanding nature of the dark side, he knew that to survive, he required more power. His genius helped him get this far into his career as a Sith. Now, he'd be as humanly loyal to Sidious as he could be. In a way, Krell wanted to replace Vader, but he didn't think that would ever happen, so he needed to be more effective than Vader, which is what he would do. Krell was already a powerhouse. He was an unstoppable force. He couldn't be controlled when he fought Jedi. Yes, Vader was strong and powerful, but a being without armor that could wield 2 double-bladed lightsabers with full speed and maneuverability was something truly special. Sidious knew it too. It even reminded him of Plagueis. He even would get to watch holograms of Krell killing Jedi. Every time one of the Sith went out into the field to do work, a drone would capture the footage. Sidious would watch Inquisitors struggle with Padawans and former younglings. Vader would dominate through sheer strength, but that was a far cry from what Anakin Skywalker could have become. Krell, on the other hand, was essentially what Vader should have been. Though old Sheev wasn't going to just give up on Vader yet. He didn't fully trust the fallen Jedi to be a loyal Sith, so he made sure there remained an ounce of competition. Sidious could also feel the rising power within Krell, and while he didn't fear it, he knew it could become hard to manage if it was not watched over properly. To keep the rigidness present between Vader and Krell, Sidious paired them up with each other and then sent them to the Outer Rim. Initially, Palpatine planned on waiting about 10 years until he moved into the Outer Rim, but he would jump the gun now. Though instead of cracking down with the full power of the Empire, it would be just a couple of destroyers and units of newly commissioned stormtroopers. These units were meant to fail, but they were also meant to test the two Sith. The strain on the dynamic between Vader and Pong forced them to separate themselves to separate vessels. All at the same time, Sidious turned on the droid armies from the Clone Wars and gifted them over to pirates in the Outer Rim. It was just a pleasant little gift, and it would screw over the Sith more than ever. Another thing is, Sidious didn't want Vader or Krell getting easy kills on Jedi Knights and Padawans. The Inquisitors existed for a reason. There was another reason. Sidious wanted Vader away from him so he could focus on his secret projects, one of which being eternal life. Krell could tell that there was something going on, and there was a reason aside from Vader that he was being forced into a strenuous situation. The established power in the galaxy ran through Palpatine. There was something he didn't want Vader or Pong to know about. Whatever it was, Krell wanted to get to the bottom of it. The secrets were an investment, but in his own mind, a worthwhile one. Vader seemingly never connected the dots together. Though it wasn't all that surprising, all things considered, Vader still hadn't considered the fact that Sidious was responsible for the multiple assassination attempts on Padme during the war and even before it. Though Vader did have his issues with Krell that stemmed from before the time of becoming Darth Vader, but because as Darth Vader, he couldn't hold attachments to Anakin Skywalker, he could not be angry at Krell for what happened on Umbara. Krell decided to keep Vader out of the loop of the things he was thinking about, and during a battle with a resurrected Separatist fleet, Krell would be separated. In his isolation, he would take a Gazanti cruiser into the unknown regions, using the information Dooku had on his Wayfinder to get to Exegol. After Dooku died, Sidious took his Wayfinder from Castle Sereno and deposited it to the Eye of Webbish Bog on Mustafar, so that one day Vader could retrieve it. Sidious had no clue that the information had been gifted to Krell, and he would use that information to discover the beginning of the Final Order. Krell realized that it wasn't the key to everything, but it was a step in the right direction to what Sidious was trying to do. Krell identified himself as Lord Vader, believing that he hadn't been here, but the Sith Eternal accepted what he said. They knew of Vader because of Sidious, but Sidious never brought him here, let alone told him where the Wayfinder was. Whenever Sidious did return to Exegol, he would learn an unnerving truth regarding his newest Sith assassin. Krell had his suspicions about his place with the Sith, and now he realized what Dooku was never intelligent enough to realize. He was just a tool for Sidious. The various cloning facilities set up on Exegol meant that the destruction of Kamino had to do with something deeper. The Sith Lord was doing something huge, and it needed to be uncovered, but secretly. No need to have himself killed for snooping around. Pong knew that to secure himself a place in the Empire, he needed to become popular amongst Imperial citizens, which due to his conquest in the Outer Rim, became very easy for him. Vader was at a disadvantage because Sidious kept him hidden from the public eye, and it allowed Pong to gain the upper hand. Due to the publicity, Krell was also able to garner Imperial allies within the military. This included high-ranking Imperial officers. This too helped Krell with feeling a bit more comfortable in the situation, though secretly, he was gaining favor with the Emperor. Sidious enjoyed a successful student, and while Vader was still 110% his student, he believed there was potential for Pong. Because Krell found a place to succeed at instead of betraying the Sith Lord, he became allies with Vader and used him as a way to look more powerful. Every time Vader had a victory, Krell's numbers would be doubled with less troops. Instead of being silent, Krell was championed as a warrior, and he thrived off of it. He continued to ascend in the Outer Rim, and with a foot in the door thanks to some powerful Imperial officers in the Outer Rim, Krell was able to remain safe from the potential struggles with the Empire. All the while, Vader is becoming more and more annoyed with Pong, his focus turning to Krell instead of Sidious or the war in front of his eyes. Because while they conquered, Vader would just turn his focus to his greatest rival, the one who could overthrow him, and so he missed everything going on under his nose. Krell helped enslave the Outer Rim, and Vader never saw a peep of the slavery. For the next several years, Krell and Vader would be kept away from each other. They never fought with each other, aside from the embarrassment inside the temple when they first met, but the two of them never got along per se. Vader continued being quiet as the enforcer within the ranks of the Empire, while Krell filled the role that Anakin Skywalker once held during the Clone Wars. He was a champion of the Outer Rim expansion. Sidious took advantage of this, but he was more than aware of Krell's knowledge of Exegol, though that didn't matter once the first Death Star was destroyed over Yavin 4. It was under Vader's command, or at least supervision. Krell saw the destruction of the Death Star as a chance for him to take advantage of all the support he gained in the years leading up to this moment. As an Imperial with a relative amount of internal support, he could rally people against the Emperor. See, Krell saw this moment as a defining one for his own chance at the throne. Vader knew he would take the blame, and because Sidious had already begun favoring Pong as of the last couple years, it seemed even more imperative for him not to mess it up. But he did. Sure, he wasn't the one who blew Alderaan to hell, however, he also wasn't able to shoot a 19-year-old first-time X-Wing flyer out of the sky. Vader knew he would have to return to his master, having failed. This is until Pong Krell reached out to him and requested that he come to his star cruiser orbiting Ord Mantell. Krell was completing another round of orbital bombardments on a hostile system. It was on the way to Coruscant, so Vader took the deal. He eventually arrived at Krell's fleet and joined him inside the Star Destroyer. Over the past few years, the two had barely communicated. They preferred it this way. Sidious was content with where things went. He knew they hated each other, and he didn't have to worry about them trying to come for him. They spent the longer part of a decade in the Outer Rim fighting against Separatist remnants and pirates. Lately, they'd been separated, and now Vader was expecting to kill Krell. He knew that this would be troublesome. The Empire wouldn't stand for their golden boy being killed after the destruction of the Death Star, but that wasn't what came. Krell didn't want to fight. He told Vader that there were whispers within the Empire that Tarkin was preparing to overthrow Palpatine. Vader didn't believe it, and he initially thought that this would be the perfect way for him to seize an advantage over Krell, but he listened. He realized that the day would never come that he couldn't. With the Death Star destroyed, in comparison to Krell's perfect record, his time was short-lived. Pong was correct about Tarkin, though. The Death Star was his ticket to absolute power. Krennic was just as much of a nuisance as Palpatine was, and due to disfavor in the Senate, Tarkin could have seized control by reinstating the Senate under his own guidance. Krell then continued and said that the Empire would call for help at this moment, a rallying cry if you will. However, it was clear the old leader was inefficient, and shutting down the Senate could be seen in two ways in Krell's mind. Pong believed that it would show that Sidious feared being ousted from office. A super weapon being destroyed would add to the public perception of his paranoia. Krell suggested they take Tarkin's plan and implement it. However, due to the nature of things, one of them must become Emperor in the new Empire. Vader had no interest in such things. However, he wasn't going to be a pushover. Krell suggested equal leadership, one with a public face though. Vader did like this idea. It meant that Krell would take on the persona of the new Emperor, while both of them would lead from behind the scenes. Even better, they wouldn't have to see each other. Pong had plenty of time to plan this out. He'd been doing so for nearly 20 years, and he had everything the way he wanted it to sound. So what came next was how they would deal with it. This was planned as well, and Vader liked it, so it was implemented. Vader knew that if he went back to Sidious, the chances are Sidious would betray him and potentially kill him, so he took this deal as a chance for him to escape that and survive with true power. Using the Force together, Vader and Krell would create a Force projection. Sidious awaited Vader inside of his palace, otherwise known as a former Jedi temple. When Vader eventually joined him, they would speak, until the temple itself was ripped to shreds. The orbital bombardment was a surprise to many, but it was seen as an act of defiance. So before it could be interpreted as such, Krell went to the Senate, and Vader took the data Pong had and went to Exegol. The two Sith knew they couldn't defeat Sidious on their own. Without using the orbital bombardment, they would have been dusted by Sidious. So, Krell went to the Senate. He announced to the galaxy that the Death Star was a super weapon Sidious created to take a hold of the people in the galaxy. The late Emperor was becoming paranoid, and he cost the lives of more than 1 million Imperial soldiers. All of those that died didn't know Sidious's desire to take over the galaxy with martial law. Instead, Pong would be reinstating the Imperial Senate as a newly crowned Emperor. At the same time, Vader would arrive on Exegol and find Darth Sidious. He had survived, using the dark side to essence transfer out of his body on Coruscant to the one on Exegol. He was struggling though. His body was limp and he was falling to the ground, slipping and watching limbs fall off. Sidious's fingers detached and he crumbled to the ground, crying out for the Sith Eternal to help him. When Vader showed up, he arrived through the smoke, his breathalyzer instilling the first taste of fear into Sidious's heart in his entire life. Vader ignited his lightsaber as Sidious tried to steer clear, but there'd be no survival for the former Emperor. Krell on the other side of the galaxy had a chance to figure out who destroyed the Death Star. It wasn't ever made clear to him who Vader was, but he had his assumptions, due to similar traits between Vader and Skywalker, not to mention the fact that Anakin's body was never recovered. So when he learned that Luke Skywalker destroyed the Death Star, he knew what needed to be done. Pong had secret hopes that Vader might be killed on Exegol. but when it never happened, he was able to adapt. He was alright with either alternative, whether it be the one where Sidious killed Vader, or if it was the one where Vader would co-lead with him. The former would be much easier, but the latter was manageable. There were rebels across the Empire when it was announced Sidious died, but Krell had been planning for this for years, studying every political move that Sidious made, understanding Palpatine's rise to power, and how he maintained it. He wanted to know how to become just like Sidious so he could outlive him and establish a power much greater than his own. But there was still one threat that Krell needed to deal with, which was the Alliance. Luckily, his overthrowing of Palpatine and the re-establishment of the Imperial Senate brought a lot of people back to the Empire. Sidious was vilified for being the leader of the operation against Alderaan. Krell informed the people of the galaxy that it would never happen again, and every single Imperial project would be shown to the public. That was a lie, but no one needed to know that. When Vader returned to Coruscant, it'd be time for them to prepare for the destruction of the Alliance. This time, they wouldn't use scare tactics. They would allow the Alliance to terrorize themselves out of existence. If they continued being rebels to a system that usurped their leader and reinstalled a figment of democracy, then the people would rally against them with the Empire. The rebels had a short-lived victory because the Empire would pull back, become less interested in martial law, do everything opposite of Sidious's regime. While there were pockets of Imperials that tried to flee to the Alliance due to Palpatine's death, they weren't met with open arms. Krell intended for this, and because the rebels turned against these Imperial defectors, it opened up a pathway to find the Alliance. Instead of allowing Vader to find his son, it would be a two-part battle, one in which Vader would lead the space battle, and the other where Pong would lead the ground assault. It took months to track down the rebels. It was after a skirmish between the Alliance and Imperial defectors, and it drew Krell and Vader to their location, and it would be the end of the rebellion. The battle between light and dark would be fought over Rhodia. Luke piloted an X-Wing away from his father, as ace star pilots chased down the Falcon and tore apart squads of rebel fighters. On the ground, Krell would lead stormtroopers into the rebel base, where he would slaughter their leaders and keep no prisoners. He didn't want anyone surviving. Due to the interdictor field set up around the planet, it would only be a matter of time until all the rebels were killed. The interdictor field would stay up for months, but Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie would be killed in the first 24 hours of the assault. Due to the work of the Emperor, the victory over the Alliance felt like something the people of the galaxy should rejoice in. Many people supported the destruction of the rebels, and with their time having come, it was time for true order to reign over the galaxy once again. To ensure there was stability between the two Sith, they came up with ground rules for their empire. There would be no slaves, there would be new Inquisitors, there'd be no martial law, and there would be no tension between either of them. The two of them still had no liking for each other, but they could tolerate the other. That was more than enough for both of them. However, they would still be looking over their shoulders to make sure the other wasn't bringing a knife to their back. The reality is, neither of them wanted anything more though. They had absolute power. Killing each other would offset the status quo and their own dynamic. Vader hated politics and wanted nothing to do with being the Emperor. Krell had since grown in adoration for political power, and now he had it. Working in tandem was easy with Vader because nothing could affect his rule. Though the true irony of the two fallen Jedi becoming the Sith of the galaxy is that once their Inquisitorius was born, they became the same thing as the Jedi. They were nothing short of the same. A central powered religion with political influence over the entire galaxy. Their combined power wouldn't be stopped, and despite Krell living long past Vader, he'd be sure to give Vader his proper accolades, but for Krell, he'd pick up the studies where Sidious left off, though he'd never figure out how to find eternal life. His greatest student would take his place in the future, but the Empire itself would remain untouchable for years to come. And that, my friends, is our dark story. Special thanks to the Grand Tier Patron who requested this, and special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandler, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Grandaddy Bane, Laliand, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Sharkman Dory, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sith Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, 46 Star Wars, Airbus, Rex Wolf, the man 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Luke Denwing. Smash that like button. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. There are early access to full videos for Grand Tier Patrons available now. Otherwise, let's talk about the story. So truthfully, this was really hard for me to do. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I'd make this work. Pong Krell is a really hard character to work with because he's the villain's villain. He's a really devious character, and I didn't want him to just be a one-shot villain. You can't really do a story like this and have him just kind of disappear. You know, he has like more screen time in Clone Wars than Grievous and like Dooku. So I had to take advantage of what we have to work with, and I wanted him to kind of be like Dooku, but also be this powerhouse that Vader is. I think Vader would genuinely hate him, but I think the fact is, the status quo would be much more important to both of them than actually trying to kill the other. And I think that's the only reason they'd stay together and kind of forge this dynamic, because Vader doesn't want political power. He likes power, and so Krell would give him that power. And Krell, at this point liking political power, would have what he wants. So both of them get what they want without having to fight with each other. So that's really the only reason it works, is the status quo isn't ruptured. So I hope you all enjoyed this dark story. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.